Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, found himself in a peculiar situation in the early 1970s. Just as he was about to release one of his most heartfelt songs, Burning Love, a surprising twist occurred. Many people think Brenda Lee was the first to record this poignant tune, which speaks of regret and a wish for things to be different. However, Elvis had actually recorded it just days after his iconic version, Suspicious Minds. What made this situation even more peculiar was that Brenda Lee had released her own version of Burning Love just a short time before Elvis, in July 1972. Her song made it to number 45 on the US country chart, which was a small victory for her but didn't overshadow Elvis's eventual massive hit. Elvis's Burning Love, released as a US single in August 1972, soared to number 2 on the charts, becoming his biggest hit since Suspicious Minds. In the UK, it reached number 7. This success was somewhat overshadowed by a curious footnote in music history: Elvis's speedy release of the song. Usually, a songwriter gives an artist a song with the understanding that it must be released within a year, but here, it seemed the system faltered. Brenda Lee had recorded her version just days after Elvis, yet Elvis managed to rush his version to the market first. This move allowed him to capitalize quickly, releasing Burning Love through US Decca, followed by its inclusion on the album Burning Love and Hits from the Movies. Despite the commercial success, the release strategy raised eyebrows. RCA Records, Elvis's label, opted for a budget approach, bundling the new hit with older film songs on a lower-priced album. This tactic was financially savvy. Selling a popular song on a cheap album was a smart move, and it sold over 1 million copies. However, it was a misleading product. Fans who bought the album were not getting a cohesive collection, but rather a mix of old and new, with the focus on the hot new single. The packaging left much to be desired, with repetitive stage photos adorning the covers. It was a far cry from the classy packages his Japanese counterparts were known for. This incident wasn't just a footnote in Elvis's career, it highlighted a broader issue in the music industry at the time. Song ownership and release rights were complex, and sometimes they didn't work in the artist's favor. Elvis's situation was just one example of how the industry could sometimes operate in ways that confused or even disappointed fans. As Elvis continued to tour, his performances were a mix of new hits and old favorites. Burning Love became a stage favorite, though Elvis was never fully comfortable performing it. He even went as far as using a lyric sheet, hinting at his reluctance to fully commit to the song. Despite this, the song's popularity soared, and it remained a staple in his live shows. Elvis's life off stage was just as eventful. His April tour started with a memorable encounter in Richmond, Virginia, where fans were so ecstatic they nearly overwhelmed him. A few days later, he performed in Indianapolis despite fierce thunderstorms, showing his dedication to his fans. In Albuquerque, he met a young woman battling cancer and dedicated a song to her, showcasing the compassion that was a part of his character. These moments, captured in the documentary Elvis on Tour, revealed a man deeply connected to his audience, even as he struggled with his own demons. As Elvis's career continued to evolve, his interactions with the world around him remained as fascinating as his music. The story of Burning Love and its release is just one piece of the complex puzzle that was Elvis Presley, a man who could captivate audiences both on and off the stage. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, had a reputation for loving food, especially the kind you'd find at a casual diner or a drive-thru. Growing up in Tupelo, Mississippi, young Elvis didn't have much meat in his diet. His family was poor, and what they did eat was mostly vegetables from his Aunt Lillian's garden. They'd have cornbread, fried okra, beans, and milk. Sometimes they'd cook up squirrel, possum, or rabbit, but fish was a no-go for Elvis. He just didn't like how it smelled or tasted. As Elvis grew older, his love for junk food took over. He had a thing for movies and TV, and he'd always have cookies handy while watching. At the cinema, his go-to treats were Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, Jujubes, and Pepsi. This love for snacking stayed with him throughout his life. When Elvis moved into Graceland, his mother Gladys made sure to feed him his favorite meals. However, one of Elvis's biggest struggles was his appetite and the foods he craved. He loved burgers and thick chocolate shakes, often eating at the Gridiron restaurant in Memphis, now known as Big Bill's Barbecue, which ironically sits on Elvis Presley Boulevard. A funny story shows how much Elvis loved to eat. One time, he ordered an enormous meal at a restaurant and finished it all. When he asked if anyone else wanted anything, it was clear how much food he could really go through. Elvis even had his own version of a favorite snack, a fried peanut butter and banana sandwich. A friend remembered visiting him in 1955 and waiting while Elvis fried up bacon and eggs for himself. Even when Elvis joined the army, his love for good food didn't change. His first army meal of sausages and fried eggs proved he could still enjoy simple foods. Although he wasn't overweight before his military service, coming out of the army, he was muscular and lean, perfect for his upcoming film roles. However, as Elvis's career progressed, especially in the 1960s, he started to gain weight. This wasn't just a minor issue, it affected his image as the "Love Me, I'm Slender" poster boy. To manage his weight, Elvis would sometimes go on crash diets or use diet pills. He was notably overweight during the filming of Paradise Hawaiian Style in 1965, but it wasn't a serious concern yet. Elvis had his own chef, Mary Jenkins, at Graceland from 1963 until his death. She played a big role in his life and even got him a car and a home. Her memoir gives insight into Elvis's eating habits and his love for good food, though some might say it was a contributing factor to his health issues. Despite being at Graceland, Elvis still loved to eat out. He and his friends would hit Colette's Italian restaurant in Memphis for late-night feasts. Elvis would devour 3 massive pizzas, each piled high with meat and sauce. He even joked about loving Colonel Sanders' chicken, a nod to the famous KFC founder. As Elvis's career in Vegas took off, his eating habits began to affect his health. Work stress, the breakup with Priscilla, and just plain old overeating caught up with him. By 1973, things took a turn for the worse and quickly. His jumpsuits only made his condition more obvious. Elvis lost touch with his self-esteem and the will to control his eating habits. As Mary Jenkins noted, eating was the only thing that gave him any pleasure. In the end, Elvis's love for food, while a big part of his charm and personality, also played a role in his declining health. His journey from the hungry boy in Tupelo to the indulgent star in Graceland shows how food was both a source of joy and a challenge throughout his life. Elvis Presley's eating habits and lifestyle were quite unique and often fueled discussions, especially after his death. People often exaggerated how much he ate, but it's clear he had a hearty appetite, especially for comfort foods. Imagine Elvis after a long day, sitting down to a massive meal. His breakfast could be a huge omelet with lots of bacon, and for lunch, he might devour a box of sweet donuts. On the go, he'd opt for a big pot of yogurt, eating it all in no time. When it came to snacks, Elvis loved Krispy Kreme donuts. So much so, after he passed away, a Krispy Kreme opened near his home, Graceland. This shows how much these treats were a part of his life. Elvis had a specific routine. He'd sleep most of the day, waking up around 4 p.m., and his meals were spread out throughout the day. On days he had shows, he'd eat even more. After performing, he'd have a big dinner, and sometimes another one later. At night, he'd go to bed with food nearby, ready to eat whenever he woke up. His bedroom had a fridge stocked with food, and always had cold Mountain Valley spring water. Elvis never drank tap water, preferring this spring water instead. Despite what some might say, Elvis didn't eat to the point of being grossly overweight. His fans cared a lot about his image, and they didn't like jokes about his weight. Some famous musicians, like Glenn Campbell, learned the hard way not to make fun of Elvis about his eating habits. One funny story shows how much Elvis loved certain foods, like the Fool's Gold Loaf from a diner in Denver. This sandwich was extra special, with lots of peanut butter and bacon. Even though it was far from Memphis, Elvis insisted on having it delivered, showing how much he craved it. Elvis's relationship with food became more serious as his health declined. In his last days, he tried to diet but still couldn't resist his cravings. His last meal was a mix of ice cream and cookies, a fitting end to a life filled with rich, indulgent foods. Now let's talk about a different time in Elvis's life, from 1973 to 1975. This was a period when Elvis was trying to stay relevant in the rock world. He did something really ambitious, a concert from Hawaii broadcast worldwide. It was a big deal because it was the first time a show would be broadcast live to such a vast audience. Elvis loved Hawaii and the idea excited him. However, he wasn't in the best mood when it was time for the concert. He had personal issues, like feeling betrayed by his partner Priscilla. To prepare, Elvis went on a diet and stopped taking drugs. He lost some weight and was ready for the big show. The concert was filmed and shown globally, reaching millions. It was a huge success, proving Elvis could thrill audiences, whether in person or on TV. Though it didn't get the same recognition in the UK due to the high cost of broadcasting, it left a lasting impression elsewhere. Elvis's journey through the early 1970s shows how he tried to balance his love for music, food, and his personal struggles. His story is full of passion, indulgence, and ultimately, a life that captivated the world.